paid a penny for this personally. No, for them, they're doing their work.
Russia sells natural gas to Europe, and the pipeline goes through Ukraine. And as of yesterday, the day before, or today, that pipeline no longer works. Ukraine is almost literally biting the hand that feeds it in order to punish Russia. It's not allowing natural gas to Western Europe. I think Western Europe anticipated that or has adapted to it. But were you surprised at this?
Well, one of the Western newspapers said Russia cuts off gas supply to Europe.
No, it's got to be a CIA headline.
No, but it just shows the falsity that we live with. Our government's lying every single minute. Russia did not cut off gas to Europe. The U.S. cut off gas to Europe through its agent, Ukraine. So Ukraine stopped the gas shipments. This will hurt Ukraine. This will hurt Europe. It will, at least a bit, enrich American LNG exporters. So this is a U.S. game for a few people that count, that make campaign contributions, that make money. And we see the U.S. With the LNG contracts to Ukraine and U.S. LNG at many times the cost that they would have paid for Russian gas rushing to Europe right now. So again, it's a game that the losers are the people of Ukraine, the people of Europe. The idea is to punish Russia because in our kind of our government's deep state, it's not, I won't say it's masochism because they're not inflicting pain on themselves. They're inflicting pain on the American people. They're inflicting pain on the Europeans. They're inflicting pain on the Ukrainians, and they're doing it so that they can do their best to inflict pain on Russia. It's a great world where the great challenge is how much harm can I cause to someone else? Not can I solve any single problem in this world.
President Putin has indicated several times a desire to speak to Donald Trump when he becomes the president of the United States in 2 weeks. What do you think Putin hopes to gain from, I'm going to use the plural, those conversations?
Well, what he hopes, but I think his hopes will be tempered by experience, but he hopes that the U.S. and Russia can establish a security relationship. What do I mean by that? The U.S. and Russia each have 6,000 nuclear warheads, most of which are aimed at the other side. They have 1,600 deployed nuclear warheads ready to be launched, most of which are aimed at the other side. This relationship determines whether the world survives physically, literally, or not. We are at the brink of nuclear Armageddon, though our mainstream media are just as stupidly dumb and silent about this as can be. The United States has destabilized the nuclear arms framework. Starting in 2002, the United States unilaterally withdrew from the anti-ballistic missile treaty. Then the United States unilaterally, over Russia's strident and ardent and understandable objections, began to deploy anti-ballistic missile systems, the Aegis missile systems, in Eastern Europe near to Russia. The United States continued to pursue the eastward expansion of U.S. military bases, so-called NATO enlargement. 7 countries in 2004, as we've talked about: Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Slovakia, Slovenia, Bulgaria, and Romania. And then in 2008 said, we'll move on to Ukraine, which is the reason for the war in Ukraine. Then in 2019, under the first Trump administration, the United States unilaterally abandoned the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty. We have war, and we have a breakdown of the nuclear arms control situation. This is our real crisis. This has put America at greater risk than ever before. These fools, or demented or absent President Biden, for example, has made America far less secure in the last 4 years. It's a disgrace. This is what President Putin would like to speak about, grown up to grown up. God help us, I hope such a serious discussion takes place. It would involve the question of whether NATO is going to stop moving, whether the US is going to stop deploying missile systems near Russia's border, whether the US is going to re-enter agreements like the Intermediate Nuclear Force Agreement or the broader nuclear arms control strategic framework. Those are not only serious issues, those are existential issues. With Biden, we didn't have one moment of this in a serious way, not one. This is why Jake Sullivan has been the worst national security advisor in our modern history. And I would say Blinken has been the most useless Secretary of State. And what we surmise about Biden and what we're now starting to hear glimmers of is that he's not been all there mentally, even from the start of his term. But that's what President Putin wants to talk about. Actually, let's just call it grown-up things.
But the grown-up things that President Putin wants to talk about, and I agree with everything you just said, Jeff, Professor Sachs, is really going to go against the American cultural grain in all of American government, not just the deep state, but even the people that Donald Trump has indicated he intends to appoint to surround him on national security, have the same mindset as Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken. They just have R after their names instead of D.
This is correct. There's a fundamental mindset issue in the United States. It was pointed to by J. William Fulbright 60 years ago. It was probably the first foreign policy book I ever knew of when I was a young kid. And this was a book that he called The Arrogance of Power.
Yes.
He was then the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And we know that pride goeth before the fall. American pride, American arrogance, American belief that we must get our way always, because if we don't get our way, we'll lose the trust of all the allies around the world that support us. So we have to stand up and win every time. This is profoundly, deeply set in the American psyche, in the political class in Washington, in the acceptable rhetoric, in the opinion columns, in the editorials. It's true today. David Ignatius in the Washington Post, basically, he answers questions for his readers at the start of the new year. He's a voice of the CIA typically. And it's all the blather of the U.S. will triumph, Russia will be defeated, the U.S. will triumph. So this arrogance is extraordinary. And it went into overdrive in December 1991 when the Soviet Union ended. And then America declared itself as the indispensable country and the world's sole superpower. A wonderful new history of this period after 1991 by a wonderful historian, Jonathan Haslam, has the book title, Hubris. This is another word for arrogance. Hubris is the hallmark of American foreign policy. And unless we get over the hubris, we'll drive ourselves to destruction. This is the basic point.
Do the superpowers, the United States,